we've got these all sorted, and so we've got our final 10 that we're going to turn in. This is the point that you should start editing. If you've edited before this point, that's okay, but in terms of efficiency, this is the time you want to edit because you're on your final 10, and so you're not editing anything you won't actually use. So to edit, you just select an image. I'm going to select this one because just looking at it, I can tell it needs some work. And you hit D as in dog on your keyboard, or you can click on Develop over here. Now to edit, I want to make this screen bigger, so I make it bigger. And if you've got this thing open on the left side, I go ahead and close that. Film strip, I close that. Using these arrows, I close all those things to make my preview here as big as possible. All right, now before I'm going to reset, I think I might have done, looks like I haven't done any editing. Okay, so let's just look at this picture for a second before we start messing with all these little adjustment sliders. What does it need? I would say it's a little dark, and that's about it. Highlights are pretty good. They could be a little brighter, but and then shadows are pretty good. But the overall thing is just a bit dark, not dramatically, maybe half a stop dark. Over here on the top right is my histogram. I want to look at that as well before I start messing with things. What does this tell us? What this tells me is it is a bit dark, and specifically the highlights are dark. So it's telling me a little bit different than what I was thinking looking at it, but specifically because it's not that final like hump of the histogram is not going all the way to the right. The highlights could be a bit brighter. Now underneath that, I can look at my settings and kind of evaluate what could I have done differently back when I took the picture. It looks like my aperture was f4.0, so that's pretty bright. Shutter speed was 125, again pretty bright. Probably move that ISO up would probably be the thing to do. Alright, so I'm going to go down here, I'm going to skip a lot of these settings, I'm going to go over to exposure because that's the main thing I need to adjust on here. By the way, the color I think looks pretty good. I don't think it needs like a color temperature adjustment. The red's coming out, the blue's coming out, they look pretty good. Alright, so exposure, I'm going to try +5, I'm 0.5, so it's half a stop. So remember, one stop is double the amount of light, half a stop is 50% more light. And I'm looking at that, and I'm feeling like that's actually a bit too much. So I'm going to go back down to 0.25. I think that's actually better. It's just a little bit brighter, nothing dramatic. Just makes everything appear more at the correct exposure. Alright, from here I'm going to try to adjust my highlights because my histogram's telling me they're not bright enough, but I think they might be. Sometimes you have to use your subjective opinion a little bit. Well, let's try to adjust this. Okay, so I can make those a little brighter or a little darker. Let's make them just a little brighter. Like that. I don't want to go too extreme, just slightly brighter. Okay, shadows, I'm going to make them just slightly darker. Just to get a little more contrast there, I think. I don't think my whites and blacks need to adjust that much. So if I adjust my whites to get a nice bright white, I think it just gets a little too bright. So I'm going to bring that back down. So I'll do a little whites adjustments. And then blacks, I don't really want to do that. I start losing all the detail in the shadows. So I actually brought them up a little bit there. Okay. All right, so this was a pretty easy one. There's not a whole lot to adjust with exposure. Now, now I've done the exposure, I can start adjusting other things. Again, I'm going to leave my color temperature alone just to show you what that looks like. I can make it warmer, cooler, but I don't think it needs it. Command Z to undo that. All right, now I'm going to go on to presence. I'm going to zoom in on this hot dog. So sorry, this is kind of gross. Oh, is that all it zooms in? Okay, that's all it zooms in. We'll see. There we go. All right. So I'm going to move the texture up to get a little more detail. Looks pretty good. Nothing dramatic. I don't really like clarity that much. To me, it makes things look kind of crunchy. I don't know, hard to describe. But maybe just a little bit. Sometimes you do need it if your image gets kind of muddy. But okay, now vibrance. I'm going to zoom out again. It'll bring my color out a little bit. That's too much, obviously. This one's kind of subjective, but since we are doing color, we probably want a little bit of vibrance. Okay, that looks pretty good. All right, I think I'm done. Looks good. Hit G to go back to the grid view in the library. And yeah, I can say that one's done. Now just move on to the next one, evaluate, and adjust as needed. So yeah, that's editing. And so just go through each one. They might need very little. They might be almost perfect the way they are, or completely perfect. But just go through and touch up those images. I don't see any here that need anything dramatic. But yeah, that's editing. And that's it for that tutorial.